It's the Blue Vote Cafe, a little bit of wonkish, a whole lot of fun. I'm David Schellenberg along with Rachel Wickster. We're the co-chairs for Democrats Abroad in Canada's capital region in the oddly sunny city of Ottawa. Hello, Rachel.
It never takes long to get to the weather.
I know.
I think our last episode, it was snowing with beautiful, picturesque flakes. And now, yes, it's still winter, but it is sunny. It's beautiful out today.
Yes, I've was sleeping in the streets of Ottawa for
you have been, yes.
A fundraiser to bring awareness to homeless youth in the capital of Canada and the problem of, even in some of the richest, safest countries of the world that have some of the best safety nets, it's amazing how many, literally hundreds, literally thousands of people still fall through the cracks and need additional help.
Yeah, and that is a pretty what is the word I'm looking for? I mean, it's as a way of illustrating the problem to go out and spend the night on the streets. It's a good thing to do.
And discovered the importance of a pillow as a part of all.
Oh, so you weren't able to bring your pillow, your quilt, and your teddy bear?
Well, it's the things you don't think you're going to need. I mean, I could have brought them all, and I have a perfectly good teddy bear that probably missed me all night long. But you never think to actually bring these things. It's not till you're actually lying literally in the street trying to get comfortable that you think, wow, it would be nice right now? The simplest thing, a pillow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's incredible. And then remembering that so many people do without that.
Yep.
Well, good for you, David. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, thank you for your donation. And actually, a whole bunch of Democrats Abroad people donated, which was really nice.
That really is. Well, we're givers, aren't we?
Yeah, we're rich.
I didn't say rich.
No, we're rich.
We give of ourselves, we give of our time, and some of us, when we have a few dollars to spare, give those too.
Who's with us today, Rachel?
Oh, just before we do that, let me just say, for people who are new to the podcast and maybe listening to it on YouTube, if you want to access all of the episodes, we have quite a library. Just go to bluevotecafe.com and you will find everything. So that's my PSA out of the way. I will tell you who's with us today. Thank you. Today, we're going to visit Democrats Abroad Spain. We have Kathy Tullos, who is the chair of our country committee in Spain, and Andrew Anderson, who is the vice chair of the Global Veterans and Military Families Caucus and does, I gather, many other things for Spain. So hello, Kathy and Andrew.
Bienvenidos. Good evening.
Good evening. It's morning. Oh, no, I guess it's not morning here. It's afternoon here.
It's afternoon here, and Kathy and Andrew are sitting back after a hard day's work and dinner, and we are their evening entertainment, I guess. So, Kathy, I guess we'll start with you. We love to ask our Democrats Abroad members when we have them on the podcast where in the world they are. I mean, we know Spain, but that's pretty general. What brought you there and what keeps you there, and what state you vote out of?
Actually, I'm not currently in Spain. I am currently in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Whoa.
And I deeply resent your remarks about the sun because we haven't seen that for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
neither have we. That's why it was worth mentioning.
It's all good. It's all good. I am a Texas voter. My husband and I split our time between the U.S. and Spain. We are currently in Cincinnati because we have a not quite 3-month-old grandson here. Aww. And are spending some lovely time getting to know Anthony James.
Oh, nice.
I thought you were going to say because January is the best time.
To be in Cincinnati?
It's the worst time to be in Central Texas because of the trees that are sending off all the pollen into the air. So anywhere else but Texas right now.
Oh, no. And when you are in Spain, where in Spain are you?
My husband and I live in Torrevieja, which is on almost the southeast corner of Spain. It's a little city of about 100,000 people. We literally live across a pedestrian walk from the Mediterranean. So when I'm not loving on babies, you may find me on the balcony with a glass of Rioja watching the waves go by.
That was going to be my exact question. So as in that Rioja,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The real Rioja.
And what brought you to Spain in the first place?
An airplane.
Okay. Care to elaborate? Why did you get on the plane?
Mark and I we've been married for many moons now. But we actually started talking about living abroad when we were dating. And it's always been a life goal of ours to spend some time living elsewhere. And when we went to investigate, Spain just quickly went to the top of the list. We knew a little Spanish. The travel situation was very fortunate. It's a great place to travel in and from, and we've got a tremendous base of both Spanish and expat friends in an area where both English and Spanish are very common. So, really great situation for us.
That sounds wonderful.
And that's an answer we don't get a lot. That why are you there? And the answer is just because of sheer adventure and wanting to see the world.
Oh, you have no idea about some of the adventures that we've had, but this is a GP broadcast, so we'll just leave it at that.
It's the internet, though. You never know.
That's right.
And oddly, I could see a connection between Texas and Spain with languages. That would make sense for that part of the world that you'd be comfortable in.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, Latin American Spanish and Spanish are somewhat different, but it certainly gave us a very good basis to work on our Castellano and give us a good opportunity to start interacting immediately with people who were not native in our tongue. And it's a great way to keep your head busy and learning new things in retirement. Acquiring another language is challenging and for us a lot of fun, a little frustrating sometimes, but it's a great way. We're winning at retirement. Let's put it that way.
Oh, I find my French gets better after a couple of glasses of wine. Do you have that with your Spanish?
Oui, monsieur, oui.
So, Andrew, same questions for you. What brought you to Spain and why are you still there? And what state do you vote out of?
So let's go backwards. So I vote out of the state of Virginia. We still have property and we live in Alexandria, Virginia, where I retired from federal service after 24 years. And my wife worked for the International Monetary Fund, and part of her retirement package is she could travel anywhere and retire anywhere in the world. And so they moved her where she wanted to go. So we first thought about Europe, and she always wanted to travel overseas and live overseas. So we had an opportunity to look at Germany. We looked at France because we have friends in France. And I suggested Spain because I'm fluent in Spanish. And so we ended up looking at Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, and Valencia. And Beth fell in love with Valencia. So we've been here for a year and about 5 months. So we're kind of figuring out whether we're going to make Valencia home or we're going to do this transcontinental where we're going to go back and forth because we have family back in Washington, D.C.
Wow. So a very similar story to Kathy's in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a way.
Why not just retire in the United States?
Well, that was, that's always an option because we have land out in New Mexico,
right?
We were thinking about starting a solar farm, but because my wife wanted to live overseas and because this was her kind of real first time living abroad. I've always lived abroad. I grew up as a Foreign Service family member. Then I was in the U.S. Navy. So I spent out of my I'm now 65. Out of my maybe 55 years of life, I never lived in the United States, except for when I was in the active duty Navy, went to university, and then worked for the federal government. So in relative terms, I was always in and out of the United States. So for Beth, it was an opportunity for her to live overseas, experience that. We traveled quite a bit in Europe. We've traveled to South America, where I have family in South America. And so it was an opportunity for her to kind of live a different life. And I think that was the choice we took at retirement.
Were you born in the United States?
No, I was not born in the United States. I was actually born in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. My mother's Bolivian American. My father was a Foreign Service officer in Bolivia at the time. And we traveled pretty much all over the world. Although in relative terms, if you look at the trajectory, we went from South America to Southeast Asia, back to Africa, back to Southeast Asia, up to Egypt. And I graduated from high school in Afghanistan. And,
wow.
What?
So
there's a plot twist. Okay.
Yeah. So wow. I've had a very privileged life, if you will.
Wow. That's a great story. So But here's my point of curiosity. You spent very little time in the U.S. and your wife spent very little time outside of it. How did you meet?
Well, great question. So I'd like to say it this way, just as a tickler, is I met my wife in Yemen. Pregnant pause. Okay, what is that? Oh, what do you mean? Your wife is Yemeni? No, she's an American. We work for a architectural engineering firm that won the first contract to build new embassies overseas after the 1986 bombing in Beirut.
Wow.
So she was in the interior design world. I was on the quality civil engineering side. And so our first project together, and that was coincidental, was Yemen. And so she had part of the design and I had part of the quality engineering. And we met at this conference table at a meeting in Washington, D.C., where we were headquartered out of. And it took off from there.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
That really is.
That's wonderful.
Like sending little notes back and forth across the conference table. It sounds like high school.
It's funny you say that. We actually met because I was trying to distract her by playing tic-tac-toe in a meeting during a session.
As a deliberate ploy to get her attention?
She was just, sitting next to me, and I was kind of bored, and I just kind of started doing the little X's and zeros, and she just kind of looked at me and kind of did the same thing.
You offered her the next move, and she took it.
Kindred spirits.
Exactly.
That's so sweet.
33 years later. Yeah.
Wow.
That's like some great dating advice for everybody around the world.
Tic-tac-toe.
Tic-tac-toe with the person sitting next to you.
Yeah, forget going for ice cream.
It's a very neutral game, right?
That's true.
I was thinking it was all about the X's and O's, but that's just me.
That's right. I like that. That's good.
Kathy, that's brilliant.
That's brilliant, Kathy. And now you know why she's president of the Spanish chapter. She's witty and smart.
And smart, yes. So yes, let's talk about the chapter. What drew you? How did you find out about Democrats Abroad, and what drew you to it?
Well, I've been a Democrat all my life. One of my earliest memories is watching my dad shave, and in our little house in Beaumont, Texas, and telling him why I like John Kennedy so much. And yeah, I mean, I'm 65, so cute. I was teeny. I don't think I was quite there yet, but that was. I've always been a Democrat. I am a person of faith. My faith informs my politics, and I believe that our call as humans is to create justice and feed people and house them and give them what they need to be their best selves. Kudos to you for spending the night out on the streets to draw attention to the plight of the homeless, and so that to me was democratic what pushes me into democratic politics. When we moved to Spain, I sort of thought our involvement in politics would be more limited, but a friend told me about Democrats Abroad, and here I am. Yeah. Here I am.
Yeah. So, did you go to a meeting and get sucked right in?
Well, actually, it was during COVID, so everything was online. And Jim Mercero, who was the chair of Spain before my predecessor, who only served for a few months. It's a funny story. Let me back up.
Sure.
Jim called me about phone banking. And so we had a nice little chat. Didn't think much more of it, made not that many calls, I'm embarrassed to say. Mm-hmm. And then he called me a couple of weeks later, and I thought he was going to yell at me because I hadn't made very many calls. And instead he said, well, we are in need of a chair and a vice chair for the country committee. And I'm like, well, I've been in this for about 15 minutes. That doesn't seem like a good idea. And he said, well, no, I'm calling you for vice chair. I've already got a guy, it has to be different genders. I've got a guy to be the chair, and it's a good opportunity for you to just kind of learn the ropes. And I was like, well, that's not a terrible idea. And my predecessor was able to serve for about 5 months, and then he had 2 members of his family become critically ill back in the States. And yeah, that was it for him. Totally fair call. I would have done the same in his place because he was called home to take care of his family. And so all of a sudden, I don't know anything, and I'm the country committee chair. So that's how I got to be the chair, completely by accident.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Yes,
I was wondering if I'm sure there are follow-up questions, but we can come back to them because, that's tantalizing. But Andrew, why don't you tell us how you found DA?
Yeah.
Well, so I found DA just because I've always been very active. So just a through line, my father was part of the big push by John Kennedy in the administration back in the day when they went for the Alliance for Progress down in South America. So my dad was one of the many diplomats that went down to South America to basically kind of foment the idea of having that broader, deeper relationship with South America at the time. So the Alliance for Progress was a big USAID, U.S. State Department effort to kind of turn South American countries into, kind of allies, formidable allies, if you will. So the Democratic kind of envelope has always been in our family. My mother became a very big Democrat when she became a U.S. citizen. And of course, my father's legacy is also, you could say legacy. His father was an FDR guy. So he was an FDR guy. They went to war during the Second World War, came back, big FDR fans. So we've always been Democrats. And so I've always been involved, even in my military career, I was always involved with doing things for people. Actually, my service in the Navy was actually the Seabees. And I don't know if you know anything about the Seabees. It's the construction engineering side of the Navy, which we basically do, we build and we fight is our motto. And our can do is our legacy motto. And what we do is we actually go into, my career in the Pacific was basically moving into areas and developing schools, water systems, making sure people were getting sanitations, getting new schools, building new roads, in addition to building runways and stuff like that. So I've always been a service-oriented type of individual. And so when I finally got to the States and finished university and all that good stuff, I've always been involved in politics. So in California, I worked for the mayor of Oceanside, California. And we drove some legislation to change the elections to be in line with general elections because they were off-year elections and it saved us a lot of money. Then moved to the East Coast and got involved with the Alexandria Democratic Committee and actually was a commissioner for the city of Alexandria. And then was very involved in that and became an elections official. And then after we left Virginia and came to Spain, I reached out to DA Spain and said, hey, you guys need volunteers? Happy to help you where I can. So that's kind of been my, if you will, my motivation and my energy as far as helping people out and helping things out and staying with the Democratic Party.
Wow.
Wonderful.
And what do you do within the Democratic Party now?
So within the Democratic Party back home, I'm still part of the Alexandria Democratic Party membership. I'm actually still on the elections officials roster back home. And so I get emails and stuff like that to say, hey, are you going to be available for an elections? And of course, the answer is no, because I'm here in Spain.
Right.
So because I vote absentee. But here in Spain, I've got really fortunate to get to know Kathy. And Kathy has put me to work in reference to working and focusing on our active duty military, veteran family population and getting the vote out here in Spain.
Well, and for what it's worth, I feel exactly the same way about Andrew. He is such a wonderful person and has an incredible amount of intelligence and good sense and good humor. He's easy to work with, does what he says he's going to do, just an invaluable member of our team. I mean, everything that we do is a cooperative effort. There's not one person who's rowing the boat all by themselves and everybody else is just sitting in the back eating bonbons. That's just not how Spain works.
That's good, though. Yeah, that's what you look for. It's not always achievable, but
Spanish bonbons.
I bet they're good. So tell us about some of the things you're doing, both within DA Spain and within the military.
Yes, as we get closer to the election date, Kathy, give us a little bit of insight on how Spain is getting ready for the election.
Well, of course, we have two big things underway, as do many country committees. One is our phone calling campaign. We have about 5,800 members out of an American population in Spain of 40,000. Mm-hmm. And we are calling all of our members. We had some technical troubles, so our start date was delayed. But we kicked off last week, and calls are being made probably even as we speak, actually. We are very pleased to have a robust roster of callers and a really wonderful woman in Barcelona, Doris Stanger, who is doing a tremendous job keeping all of that together. And her work has just been stellar, and she's truly an unsung hero in this situation. We're also, of course, like everybody else, gearing up for the global presidential primary. One of the things we've been fortunate enough to be able to do over the last few years is expand our geographical reach. When I joined DA, we had chapters in 4 places: Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, and Alicante. We've added a 5th chapter in Sevilla, which is much farther to the west and much farther south. We've added what we call a precinct, which is like a proto chapter, basically, up in the north in San Sebastian, Donostia, which is up in the Basque country, one in Granada, and one in Malaga. Wow. So we've had a lot of expansion. We've had new members coming in as a result, and we will have a lot more voting centers, voting assistance centers, and the like. And that has been a tremendous undertaking. Most of the work on that has been done by a spectacular woman named Helen Morgan, who lives in Sevilla. Is a former prosecutor from Denver, and has just done a brilliant job, herding the cats and getting all the paperwork in on time. And my job in both of those very major campaigns is to send a signal message saying, "That sounds great!" exclamation point. And if I'm feeling really supportive, I'll put a thumbs up after it. So that's my work. We're doing a lot of other things, but those are our 2 big ones right now.
You put me in mind of a quote. I'm trying to recover it. It's often misattributed to Ghandi, but it's something like, "There go my students or my team or whatever. I must go after them, for I am their leader."
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
There goes my hero, but that's Foo Fighters. There goes my people. I must follow them, for I am their leader. Yep.
I've seen the Foo Fighters a couple of times. They're wonderful.
Excellent. And the Veterans and Military Families Caucus, Andrew, do you want to talk a little about what you're doing with them?
Sure. So at the global level, the steering committee, which is kind of organized around 4 or 5 people, got roughly about 1,200 members and growing. And again, they're not necessarily all veterans. They're either members of the families that were veterans or had family that were in the services in the past. And so that's kind of the population, if you will. At the top level, at the global level, what we try to do is once a month we meet and try to get people to come in and talk with us about what are the important things for veterans and military families. And right now, the focus points are the educational benefits that overseas veterans can receive, medical benefits that can be translated overseas from the VA from the United States. We try to address and try to follow legislation in Congress, both in the Senate side and the House side, that affect veterans and affects veterans overseas. And then one of the focuses that the caucus has at the global level is the repatriation of deported American veterans that were veterans in the American military, but not necessarily citizens. And as you know, in the U.S. military, you're allowed to serve on condition that eventually you become a citizen. So there's kind of a little bit of a thing there.
Oh,
so apparently there's been a...
Yeah, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
it's kind of one of those unknown things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, you may have residency and you can serve active duty. And then as you move through your active duty, you become eligible for citizenship.
Okay.
Apparently, some of these individuals were deported, mostly from Central and South America. And I think the caucus is kind of focused on trying to help out to see if we can repatriate them back to the United States, because they're asking to be repatriated. Because again, the part of it is their benefits and all that good stuff.
Right.
So I think at the global level, that's kind of where we're sitting at right now. And as vice chair, it's an interesting steering committee in relative terms to being able to focus. And what we've been doing lately is reaching out to veteran organizations in the United States, for example, Vote Vet, and also VFRL, which is Veterans for Real Leadership. They're two rather large veteran organizations that are Democratic leaning. They're very they're anti-Trump, if you will. And so that group as a whole is about 2 million members. And so it's a pretty sizable group.
Yeah,
and what we're trying to do is, right.
And in fact, I was just going to say for listeners who are new to the podcast, we had Dan Barca from VFRL on the podcast a few episodes ago and learned a lot about that organization. It sounds wonderful, the work they're doing.
Right. Well, actually, I was able to introduce Dan to the Global Caucus. That's how you got to talk with him.
Right.
So yeah. So no. So again, part of it is, in my opinion, it's a false multiplier. So false multiplier. Why? Because the word gets out, people get active, people get engaged, people register to vote, and then they vote. And so we need everybody voting in November.
Absolutely.
At the chapter level, working for Kathy, she's empowered me to basically build out a master plan for her in reference to reaching out to the active duty military and veterans and civil servants that are here in Spain. Outside of Germany and outside of Italy, Spain has a large contingent of active duty personnel, as you may know, right? So what does that mean? Well, in Spain, we have ROTA. It used to be U.S. Navy bases, but a U.S. Navy base, an Air Force base that were U.S., if you will, owned, but they got turned over to NATO in the late 90s. And so they're now NATO bases with U.S. personnel. ROTA Navy Station is still part of the 6th Fleet for the Pacific, for the Mediterranean. Morón is an Air Force base right north of ROTA, which combined they're around 6,000 active duty civil servant and families. And then we have these small kind of NATO bases in Valencia, Vetera, Albacete, Zaragoza, Tarragona, Madrid, where we have smaller contingent personnel, but again, they're active duty Air Force, Army. And so we want to make sure that we get them to registered, if not registered already to vote, but get them to register to vote, their families registered to vote so they can vote in November.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So what Kathy has done is kind of empowered me to put this planning together. And so I just gave her a good plan in reference to identifying the locations, identifying where I think we should go and set up camp, if you will, to do registration, help them get registered to vote, and then also do some advertisement through Stars and Stripes, Armed Forces Radio, which we're doing with DA Global.
Right. Yes. I was just going to ask about globally, because the plan you've devised for Spain, I would imagine, could then be repeated in Germany and Italy and other countries where there are large active military personnel.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Yep.
And I want to just give a shout out to Andrew. When he's very kind to say, when I've empowered him, I sent him lots of signal messages that say, "That's amazing, thumbs up." That's pretty much all it takes. So I guess
that's what signal is for.
That's right. That's
right.
what being the chair is all about. One of the things that we also did, if you're talking about what kind of program undergirds that type of effort, one of the things that we did last year, taking advantage of a relatively quiet period, was to do some major fundraising. And everybody loves asking for money, but we tried to do it in relatively painless ways. The main effort last year was to create a base of sustaining donors who would be giving on a monthly basis. We called the program Give Me Five for Democracy, and started our ask for contributions at $5 a month. And got a really tremendous response, much of which was from people we didn't know, which was great.
That's great.
Yeah, which was really cool. And it's amazing. I mean, obviously, a lot of people gave more, and that's wonderful too. Thumbs up. But the bottom line is, when you get enough people doing that, all of a sudden your bank account looks a lot more robust, and you can think about doing some of these more expensive activities. We advertised for example, or we're paying rather for advertising on various digital platforms. We're doing the outreach to the military. We're doing a whole lot more printing materials this year, just because we have more money. And this year, in another, one of my thumbs up campaigns, right? We had a member who's moved to Valencia. Valencia's a great chapter. They're all great chapters, but Valencia's been doing some really spectacular stuff lately.
It's the wine.
Could be.
Oh my gosh, there's so much truth in that. And we don't in vino veritas, right?
I was going to say.
Vino veritas, yeah. But we have a member who came to Spain quite recently and found Democrats abroad and said, what I know how to do is raise lots and lots of money by sponsoring house parties. And she is rocking and rolling and raising money, and has done a training and will repeat a couple of trainings like this. And it's spreading across Spain to do house parties, which both can increase your membership and do a really great job fundraising. So, again, my job is to, encourage them, set up the Zooms, make sure everybody knows about these opportunities. I'm not doing any of this. I'm just helping people do what they know how to do. And they are doing marvelously. You're laughing, but it's absolutely true. My job is actually usually to get out of the way.
It's lovely, because house parties was a thing, 10 years ago, was considered to be a great way to grow. And then all of a sudden COVID destroyed it all. And to hear that it's coming back is really nice.
I think COVID actually helps us on the back end, because people are still hungry for in-person communication and building of community. It also, I think, is particularly valuable for the expat community, because we are, you love the country that you're in. I adore Spain. We are just, both my husband and I are tremendous fans, love living there. But at the same time, it's fun to know a group of people who, when you make a joke about "I dream of Jeannie," they know what you're talking about, right?
Or cheese puffs or something.
God, I miss Dairy Queen. They know what you're talking about. And so I think it's a unique opportunity for Democrats abroad generally to look at that model, because what's going on in Spain has been really quite impressive.
Oh.
We've heard that in a bunch of places where Democrats abroad is more or less a social club of people who just want to get together and have some familiar experiences.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody needs, and I mean, this is why we work on the platform, right? Because people are working caucuses, because they need to find an affinity group. And if the affinity group then propels you into a different area of activity, like political work or like charitable work or whatever it is that moves you beyond your initial comfort zone, more power to it.
Yeah, it's so true. Since we have kind of come to a pause, I have a question for Andrew. Coming back to something you said a little earlier, you mentioned you're talking to veterans about the benefits that are available to them, including educational benefits. We talked to a member of the VMF, Veterans and Military Families Caucus, in December of 2021, Mike Nitz, in a crisis moment when changes in the legislation had put a lot of those education benefits and tuition for service members overseas in jeopardy. And he was working very hard to try to get those. If I remember correctly, the legislation created this problem without it was one of those unexpected fallouts. I may be wrong about that, but I'm wondering if that's something that you followed and if you can give us an update. Was that fixed or addressed in some way?
Yes, excellent question. Actually, I'm aware of that since I joined the caucus, which has been roughly under a year. And the steering committee has been following that. And the last I heard of it is the fact that they're still working to kind of unbungle that, in the sense of what it was. It was one of the benefits was the educational benefit was that the VA would not accept or authorize a transfer of funds to a non-U.S. bank for a veteran overseas.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
And right. And so as I understand it, as of maybe a couple of months ago, there was some movement towards accepting that certain banks outside of the U.S. normal banks, if you will, were going to be accredited. For example, banks in England, right?
Right.
You can kind of know the relationship. Banks in Australia. And they're still trying to sort it out whether they would accept banks in Turkey, where we have some people, in Germany, because of the banks in Germany are a little bit different than the bank in the USA. So that's still, so I'm hoping to answer your question. As I understand it, that's still being worked through. There's been some progress, but still more progress to do, if you will.
Okay. Is there anything that listeners can do to help? Because that just sounded like just a really difficult position for some of our vets or military service people to be in.
I would appreciate it if they'd reach out to the VMF Global Caucus, have them reach out to us, and we could actually help them or filter them through what they could do for us or help us to do.
Wonderful. Yep. Thank you. All right, cool. I'm glad to know progress is made. Problem not yet solved, but.
Nope. Yep. But everything, as you know, in these types of situations, and this is why I found it interesting as a veteran myself overseas, I don't expect anything while overseas. Why? Because I'm a veteran of the United States. I'm not a veteran of Spain.
Right.
So do the benefits, the defense transfer over? No, they don't. However, in Spain, believe it or not, we have talking to some of our retired active duty military that have retired in Rota, Spain. There is some reciprocity with the TRICARE, which is the retired military health care, with certain hospitals in Spain, which I didn't know about. So I thought, that's a positive. And so maybe in Germany, they have something similar around the basis in Germany. But that's something I still got to filter out a little further. But beyond that, we have a Facebook contingent here in Spain. There's about 44 veterans that are spread throughout Spain. And we communicate back and forth in reference to what are they hearing about, benefits that they can use or not use in Spain. If they're close to the base, that's something different because you can access the base. But if you're not living near the base, can you access at the local level? That's a little bit different.
Right.
Well, so a parallel for non-military members is the pilot project the DA has launched on Medicare portability that would allow anyone who's eligible for Medicare to use it in their country of residence, which when we had Heather Stone come talk to us on the pod, it just sounded like everybody wins. The country you live in wins. The healthcare system in the U.S. wins. The Medicare recipient wins. It just sounded like a no-brainer.
Because you don't have to go all the way back to the United States for some treatment. It's just so much cheaper and easier to do it in the country you're in.
And you're not drawing on resources back in the U.S. You're drawing on resources where you live, and you're not polluting by flying and
everything.
Everything. So hopefully that will result in some legislation at some point that will benefit Americans living overseas who at least have qualified for Medicare. That isn't every citizen. It's every citizen who's worked a certain number of years within the U.S.
As a 65-year-old that just turned 65 and just got accepted into Medicare, I think if this portability goes through, I think it's great because that allows us to use it here in Spain.
Exactly.
The other irony of this thing, just to twist it a little bit, is I'm also, since I'm a retired federal executive, I also have subsidized healthcare back in the United States, right? Because I fall under the government healthcare plan. It's now portable to Spain. So I'm actually paying medical insurance back home to keep the insurance back home, paying insurance in Spain under the private healthcare and have Medicare. So maybe that's something that's going to come. Yeah. So I'm well covered. But the thing is I'm paying quite a lot for healthcare.
Right.
And the question would be, why couldn't I use my U.S. healthcare, medical healthcare in Spain? Well, okay. So maybe that's something we can talk about later at another time with another group with DA.
Right. For sure.
It makes perfect sense, but good luck figuring that out, I think.
Yeah, right.
Is what we would know in most of the world. Kathy, I'm just sort of curious, as you have a glass of wine on your patio with people who are not American, but who live in Spain and sit and look at the United States from a distance. What kind of mood are you hearing? What do people think of the United States right now?
Well, they're pretty much shaking their heads, going, we're going to do this again? I'd say that's the most common reaction. You just have to shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, I didn't vote for him. I think there is a lot of concern, obviously, about the situation in Israel and Gaza, and whether that's going to, particularly whether that's, the conflict itself is horrible, whether that's going to turn into a wider conflict is also on everybody's mind.
Right.
So I think that is definitely one thing that is being talked about. But I think a lot of the overall reaction, if I'm getting your question correctly, is why are we doing this again? Didn't we all decide this guy's a lunatic the first time?
Yeah.
And the answer is apparently not.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you find that as well with the people you know around the world? Like, what do you think? What are you seeing that the world thinks of the United States at the moment?
Well, that's a great question, and I will share with you that I have a lot of just like Kathy does it in Spain. I have a lot of Argentinians. We have a large Argentinian population here in Spain, and I have a lot of Spanish friends here. And they will actually approach me and say, what is going on in the United States? we would have never thought the United States would be in such a pickle, they don't use the word pickle. What's interesting is the Spaniards are really almost just flabbergasted by the simple fact that the Americans are dealing with this kind of individual that's talking about, being a dictator, because they said, we in Spain lived through that and we don't want to ever live through that again.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're seeing this kind of real contradiction to us. And it's not that they feel sorry for us, but what they really do, and this is my personal opinion based on their conversations with me, the Spaniards, they'll tell me, says, if this goes the wrong way, we're never going to be able to go visit you in the United States, because we don't want to go to a place where you got this, crazy guy running the country, throwing people out of the country, threatening to throw people overseas, throwing back out to their countries. So it's kind of a scary situation for them. My Argentinian friends, on the other hand, they'll tell me, said, well, we've been there, and good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think what you end up doing is that if you look at the bigger picture of this thing, which is something that I pay close attention to, is that they're almost like feel sorry for us, and I mean that because they care about us. They love Americans. They love our way of living. They love the way we talk. They love the way our culture plays out things. But they're really worried that that's going to fundamentally change if Donald Trump gets reelected. Not only that, though, but the impact of Europe, based on the fact that what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on in Russia. it plays into their kind of overall look at what's going on. Because again, in Spain, they've accepted roughly over 4,000 Ukrainian families as refugees.
Wow!
And it's growing. Not only that, though, the Russians have come to Spain.
Wow!
And so they're kind of seeing this playing out at a global level that we are kind of throwing the ripples, if you will, into this. So, but they're just as it amazes me how engaged and how educated and how versed they are in what's going on back home. Amazing.
And in European history, when you look at the word dictator is already out there, so let's use the word dictator. Like a lot of these people were elected initially, and then that's not terribly brilliant history of Europe to know that, and then all of a sudden things change.
Right. Well, it's interesting because if you look at what's going on in Spain, Spain is fairly divided right now between the one political party and the center-right party, and so there's a big division going on here. Finland just had an election yesterday where they split the vote between the Green Party and the right-wing party, and they're going to go. So all over Europe, they're going through these kind of tribulations. And they're looking at us to say, you guys lead the way in democracy. We're not sure you guys are going to be there when we need you, right? Come November.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to make sure we are.
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's what we're doing.
That's the plan. Yep. The only option.
Yep. And that's the plan.
It's just that easy, isn't it? Well, it's all about phone banks. If we can get our phone banks, we'll solve the problems. Well, and voter assistance, and those of us who can go door to door because we can drive there in a couple of hours. Yeah. Every little bit, anything that people can do will help.
Right. I mean, in today's world, though, you got TikTok, you got Instagram, you've got Facebook, you've got ads on newspapers and websites and stuff that get the message out as much as we can. Right.
That's right.
Because that's part of it. Right.
That's right.
Well, and there are so many things that an individual can do that can have an impact. I mean, maybe you can't make 500 calls, but you can make 20. Maybe you can't give $1,000, but you can give 50. Maybe you can sit at a voter registration table at a festival somewhere in your country of residence and see if any Americans float by and register them to vote. Because we know that most overseas voters vote Democratic when they can finally figure out how to vote in their home state. You can wear a T-shirt. I was in Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, I don't know, 3 years ago, I think, and I had my DA T-shirt on, and I was standing there listening as the organist was playing. It was just lovely music, and a guy came up to me and said, "What's that?" And I mean, I'm so dumb. I said, "That's the organ."
That's great.
And he was like, "No, your T-shirt." So we had a nice little chat about DA, and he was like, "Oh, I need to get my girlfriend onto that too." And, maybe that's 2 more people who voted. Who knows?
We find that all the time too, where maybe it's not an American directly, but somebody who knows an American. And there's a lot of encouragement for just finding a local who happens to know somebody who can vote and saying, well, go talk to your buddy and make sure they actually make a difference.
Well, also because some of the laws are so obscure, you can vote even if you've never set foot in the U.S. if your parent was a citizen. And too many people don't know that.
Right. And, and getting rid of some of the myths around voting. If I start voting in American elections, the IRS is coming after me for $400 billion in back taxes.
Right.
Not the way it works, but that's out there, and people are scared, and I don't blame them. I don't like the IRS either. But, the space that people occupy has more power in it than they think they have. I mean, shoot, if you just put on your Facebook page, did you know if you live abroad, you can actually vote? It doesn't matter if you never set foot outside of your home state. You might have friends or friends of friends who can pick that up and say, hey, Rodney Jr. is doing that study abroad thing this year. I bet he can still vote, And it has legs in a way that we just can't calculate.
In fact, one thing Democrats Abroad members are asked to do, and it's not, it's a message that doesn't come through with particular force I'm trying to find the way to say it, but not many people know this. But there is actually among the DA holdings, the little repository of possible things to do.
Right.
There's a letter that you can send to your alma mater that says,
Right.
hey, do you have programs overseas? Here's a little information piece you can give your students that will help them vote from abroad. And if every Democrats Abroad member did that, that would be a lot of colleges and universities that never thought to put that information in the hands of their students studying outside the country.
Right. And it's, it is a great add-on to what many countries, including ours, can do in terms of reaching out to study abroad programs that are housed in your host country.
Yes.
There are a number of folks in Spain, for example, who go out to orientation sessions for those study abroad programs. It's you just give the kids the QR code. They all hold up their phones, they're either registered to vote if they've not registered before, or they've figured out how to get their ballot, and they're on their way once you give them something like that. Mm-hmm. So there are lots and lots of ways to do that, and it's a great opportunity to get possibly people who will continue voting and on into their adult lives.
Yeah.
Yes. From what I understand, the earlier you vote, the more likely you are to continue voting for your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I took both of our kids as little babies in their buckets and sat them under the voting room. It was like, see what mommy's doing? This is really important.
I got taken by my mother, too, into the voting booth. I asked to push the levers and help her cast.
Yeah, and we did the same thing with our son, and he's been voting ever since.
Yep.
Excellent.
It's a good way to instill the habit in your children.
Yep.
Well, and I think once people figure out that they can vote from abroad, in most states, it is kind of an ongoing process. You re-up and you continue to get ballots and continue to be registered, yada, yada. I mean, it is unduly complicated in many states, including my home state, to vote from abroad. But it can be done. And once you get it under your belt, you can actually, continue to vote. And that's important. I mean, it's a responsibility. People say, why do you vote? And I'm like, why do you floss your teeth? I mean, it's just something you ought to do.
Mm-hmm. But that's exactly why we encourage people to use votefromabroad.org, because it's tailored for your voting jurisdiction. You register with your state using votefromabroad.org, and it's very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and God love the people who answer the particularized questions who are using VFA. They deserve tiny little medals to be attached to all of their chests. That is a process.
We have amazing volunteers.
Oh my God, I did that last election cycle, and I just thought, okay, and good thing I never worked on a help desk, because I would work on the unhelpful desk, I think.
Well, there's a place for that too. But it's
what's the matter? Can't you read? No.
Oh, that's funny. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about what you're doing, or thoughts you want to share?
Well, I think a couple of other things that DA Spain is doing that are really fun and exciting. And one is we're trying to create ways for ideas to come from beyond the leadership circle. Don't get me wrong. We have an amazing team. I mean, Andrew's given you a sample today of what one person can do in his work. And it's incredible, and I value him tremendously. But he is by no means the only person in the leadership team in Spain who is doing these wonderful, amazing things. But but good ideas don't only reside in the leaders. And it is tough if you're if you're not already in a leadership position, to find ways to get those ideas to filter in. So DA Spain has been trying some things. We, for example, tried to push, please come to our online executive committee meetings and come with ideas and questions. We have tried to create space on, websites and social media. Please give us your ideas. What would you like to see out of DA? I mean, like everybody, we've sent out surveys and, the usual suspects fill them out and we get 15 responses telling us what great job we're doing. So, one thing I would like to start, and I don't know if it's honestly worth doing this year, maybe for a non-election year, would be to have basically just office hours where people sit in a Zoom room, and if nobody's there, you can, read or drink a glass of wine or whatever. But just advertise
always
that.
Wine. Yeah.
Here's a space. Here's a space where you can just come and chat and say, why does this happen? Why are we doing this? I have an idea. I would like to get involved with this, and try to create space for people to bring their stuff to the table as well. We've also tried to focus on being more intentional about being grateful to the people who do support us. And so we have one member, for example, who is writing thank you notes to all those sustaining donors I was talking about on the anniversary of when they signed up to be a sustaining donor. Nice. Nothing fancy, not a repeat ask for money, just we appreciate you. Thank you for doing this. This really helps. Quick little handwritten note, off it goes. Doesn't cost much. And you'd be shocked at how much happy surprise you get from people who get thank you notes.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Just stuff like that.
That's wonderful. Andrew, any further thoughts from you?
No, I just think that to echo Kathy, there is an incredible amount of energy out there, both at the Global Caucus level and at the chapter level that I've seen. You've got a lot of great people out there. I mean, if you think about it, between 6 and 9 million Americans living abroad and increasing. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that we're able to get and tap into the energy that's out there at the country level and at the chapter level, if you will. Here in Valencia, for example, as Kathy was saying, we got a high energy of a lot of Americans that are really starting to wake up and starting involved. We do poster campaigns. We're running up and down the streets, putting posters up. You got Spaniards looking at us like, what is this about? And, telling them, oh, that's right. You guys are having an election. Oh, that's right. Yeah, put them up there. But I think overall, by the way, your podcasts are such a benefit because messages gets out further and deeper because people will listen. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Sure. I will just add one final thought for people who have not yet registered to vote or requested their ballot. If you're listening to this episode shortly after we've recorded it, it is January. That means it's time to go to votefromabroad.org to register and request your ballot. We encourage you to do it every year. And then watch your email for information about the global presidential primary. You will have an opportunity to vote remotely, but in many places, you will also have the opportunity to vote in person. I'm Rachel Oikster with David Schellenberg in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for listening to Democrats Abroad, the Blue Vote Cafe.